There's a moment late at night when the world feels thinner, when the noise fades, the lights dim, and your thoughts wander where they shouldn't. That's when stories like these surface. Tonight's tales come from Reddit, shared by people trying to make sense of moments they can't explain. Ordinary places, familiar rooms, situations that felt safe until they were. Some of these stories end with answers, others never do. So before we begin, take a look around you. Make sure you're alone, because once this starts, you might not feel that way anymore. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you make it through. Grab some snacks and a blanket. Get relaxed and enjoy. Let's dive into our first story. This one comes to us from a user by the name Page Turner 627, and the title of this one is Our Little Arrangement. This one is a shorter one just to start this video off, but don't think that means it's any less creepy. So be ready and let's begin. My name's Sharif. Every morning before dawn, I walk the grounds of El Jella Cemetery in Tunis. That's my job, groundskeeper. I clear trash, fix broken headstones, chase off stray dogs. But 3 weeks ago, graves started opening up. Not dug, torn, like something had clawed through 2 meters of earth with its bare hands. At first, I blamed jackals. Then I found what was left of the corpses. Faces chewed off, ribs cracked like crab shells. Nothing scavenges like that. Not grave robbers either. The valuables were left behind. One night, I waited behind the mausoleum near the north wall with a flashlight and an old shotgun. It came just after 2. It moved like a person, but wrong. Limbs too long, joints too loose. It slithered into a grave and came up holding a body like a sack of dates. I stepped out. Light caught its face, no lips, too many teeth, eyes like ink. A ghoul. It hissed, dropped the corpse, and fled over the wall. I should have left it alone. Instead, I followed the trail of broken stones and bent iron into the olive grove. I found a hole under dead branches. The stench hit first, blood, rot, milk. Inside, 5 small shapes squirmed. Pups, ghoul pups. One suckled on a severed finger like a pacifier. Then the mother returned. She didn't charge, just froze halfway out of the hole, crouched low, hands spread, teeth bared, not attacking. Not yet. She growled, a wet, rattling sound, like wind through a cracked jar. I didn't raise the gun. I'm not here to hurt you, I said. Slowly I knelt, set down my flashlight, opened my lunch tin, half a boiled egg, some bread, a strip of dried fish, and slid it forward across the dirt. Her eyes locked on mine. She sniffed the air, wary. I saw your pups, I get it. I have kids too. She stayed low but crept closer, step by careful step. Clawed fingers brushed the fish, then paused. Then, surprising me, she reached farther, gently tapped my hand. Her skin was cold, dry like old leather. She took the food and slipped back into the dark. I left them in peace. Next day, I buried a goat under the oldest fig tree, marked it with nothing. She found it, took it. Now, once a week, I do the same. Scraps from the butcher. Awful. Old meat sold cheap in the market. No one asks questions. Every Friday, as I walk past the rows of graves, and the call to prayer echoes down from the hill, I feel her eyes on me, watching from the trees. Her children trail close behind her, their pale eyes gleaming through the leaves, watching, learning. I set the meat down in the dust between us. I nod. She nods back. She gathers the carcass in her arms and slips back into the dark with her pups. They vanish like mist, like a shadow folding into itself. Everyone is happy with our little arrangement, especially the dead. We aren't slowing down and going straight into the next story. This one is titled, I Threw Away My Daughter's Teddy Bear, and It Came Back. And it comes to us from a user by the name F It Logic. I'll be honest here, this one is terrifying. If you can make it through this one, or even fall asleep, you have a mind of steel. Hi everyone, I don't usually post, but I need help. I'm seriously starting to think something's wrong with our house, or maybe with me. I don't even know anymore. I'm a single parent. My daughter is 6. We moved into a small rental house about 2 months ago. Older place, creaky floors, nothing fancy, but quiet and cheap. She loved it right away, especially her bedroom. She has this stuffed teddy bear she's had since she was 2. She takes it everywhere. It's old, worn down, one eye a little loose, but she refuses to sleep without it. It was just a normal toy until a few weeks ago. One night, she came into my room around 2 a.m. and said, "He was talking again." I asked who, and she said the bear. I thought she was dreaming. She said, "He doesn't like this house." I tucked her back in, told her she was safe, and went back to bed. A few nights later, she came back again. "He said you were listening," she whispered. That one made me pause, but I still figured she was imagining things. Then weird stuff started happening. Sometimes I'd pass by her room at night and hear whispering, 2 voices, low and quiet. When I opened the door, she'd be asleep. The bear would be in her arms, turned toward her face. I thought maybe she was talking in her sleep. But then I started finding the bear in strange places. One morning, it was sitting upright on her dresser, facing the bed. Another time, it was on the floor by the doorway, positioned perfectly, like it was waiting. She swore she didn't move it. I even tested her once. I put the bear on the top shelf of her closet before bedtime, where she couldn't reach it. At around 3 a.m., I woke up to a soft thud. When I checked, it was back in her bed. She was sound asleep. The next morning, I asked her about it. She got quiet and said, "He doesn't like being up there. He gets lonely." I laughed it off, but she didn't smile. She just said, "You shouldn't touch him." Something about the way she said that calm, flat, got under my skin. That night, I stayed up late. Around 3 a.m., I heard this faint shuffling sound from her room. I peeked in, and the bear was sitting up, not in her arms, just next to her, propped up, staring toward the door. I stood there for a long time, trying to convince myself it was just her moving in her sleep. The next day, I checked the bear. It's just fabric and stuffing, no electronics, no batteries. But when I held it, it felt heavier than it should. I almost cut it open, just to see, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. That night, she woke me again. This time, she was holding the bear by one arm and said, "He wants to talk to you." I said, "What do you mean?" She lifted it up toward me and whispered, "Say hi." I told her to go back to bed. She frowned and said, "You made him mad." I took the bear, after she fell asleep, and put it in the closet. Around 3 a.m., I heard something fall. I ran in. The closet door was open, and the bear was lying halfway out. She was still asleep. The next morning, she had dark circles under her eyes. I asked if she was okay, and she said, "He doesn't like the closet. He said you should apologize." I didn't know what to say to that. That evening, I caught her sitting on the floor, holding the bear, whispering. I asked what she was doing, and she said, "Listening." I said, "Listening to what?" She said, "He's telling me about before." Before what? She didn't answer. Later that night, I was on the couch when I heard her bedroom door creak open. When I looked, the bear was in the hallway, sitting upright, facing my room. She was asleep. I threw it in the kitchen trash. The next morning, she couldn't find it and started screaming. "You shouldn't have done that," she cried. "He's going to be mad." I told her it was gone. She stared at me, totally calm, and said, "He's not gone. He told me he's coming back." I took out the trash right then, watched the garbage truck pick it up the next morning. That night, I woke up around 3:10 a.m. to the sound of something soft hitting the floor. When I turned on the light, the bear was sitting at the foot of my bed. Its fur was damp. I grabbed it, shoved it in a garbage bag, and locked it in my car trunk. The next morning, I drove to the dump and got rid of it myself. I made sure it was gone. For a few days, everything felt normal again. Until last night, I woke up to her laughing, not playfully, but this quiet, muffled giggle. I went into her room, and she was sitting up in bed, facing the wall. I asked what she was doing, and she said, "Playing with Name." I froze. "Sweetie, remember, Name is gone." She smiled this slow, sleepy grin and said, "He came back. He missed me." There was nothing in her hands, nothing on the bed, but the air felt cold. She turned toward the empty space beside her and whispered, "See, I told you he'd find us." I didn't sleep after that. I checked every inch of the house, even the car. The bear is gone, physically gone. But this morning, when I went to wake her up, there were faint paw prints across her blanket, and her window was open. She's been quiet all day, just humming to herself and talking under her breath. I tried to record her once, But when I played it back, there was static, and under it, this low, slow breathing that didn't sound like her. I deleted it. Tonight, I told her we might go stay with my sister, for a bit. She didn't even look at me. She just said, "You can go. He doesn't want you here anymore." Then she rolled over and went to sleep. It's 3:07 a.m. right now. I can hear soft footsteps in the hallway. Her door just creaked. I don't know if I should go in there. I keep telling myself it's her, that she's just awake and moving around. But part of me knows what I'll see if I open that door. I don't know what to do. If anyone's ever experienced anything like this, if you know how to make it stop, please tell me. Because I think Name is back. And I think this time, he isn't just here for her. This next story comes to use from a user by the name Cody Hart, 1776. And it's titled, "My Squad." And I came across something terrifying in Iraq. This one is an amazingly creepy military story. If you have already made it this far into the video, make sure you like and subscribe before you fall asleep if you are enjoying it so far. Get ready and let's dive in. Things changed forever when those towers came down in 2001. I was 19 at the time, eager to enlist, and that's exactly what I did. I became a soldier, longing to kill as many of the bastards behind the attacks as I could. I don't regret enlisting, but there's one city in Iraq that I wish I had never stepped foot in. In 2003, the US government sanctioned and conducted a full-scale invasion of Iraq. I was among the boys sent over there, and personally, I thought what became known as the Iraq War was gonna end in a week. And it was only a matter of time until we had Saddam Hussein's body. My squad and I were sent into a small city, no, I won't give away the name, to assist in clearing buildings with Marines, with SEALs providing overwatch from various rooftops. It was simple, but it was brutal, and I wanted nothing more than to be back home. Walking upstairs with 40 to 60 pounds of gear, finding locals who were told to evacuate long before we took the city, and the heat of the Middle East didn't help anything. We cleared structures well into the evening, and by nightfall, we came across what appeared to be apartments. We stopped for the night in one of these apartments, taking advantage of whatever food we could find. By midnight, we were all pretty worn out, and some of us were already asleep. Not me. I laid there, staring at the ceiling as jets and helicopters whirred in the distance. If not the sound, the faces of the few men I had killed in combat up to this point really kept me awake. I was about to drift off to sleep when I was jolted back up by an unfamiliar sound. I know what sounds I should be hearing right now: tanks, jets, gunshots, all of which should be in the distance, well away from where we were set up. But it sounded like it shouldn't be here. It sounded like laughing. I sat up and listened again, trying to hear it. It didn't sound like it was coming from inside the apartment, or the building for that matter. It sounded just as distant as the other noises, but was nonetheless there. It sounded like a little kid, like they were having the time of their life doing whatever they could possibly be doing. It was weird, certainly, but I was too tired and sore to care much. I slowly drifted to sleep again. I was awoken by someone in my squad. For the sake of anonymity, we'll call him John. He shook me awake and told me to come look at something. As I stood up, I noticed my other squad mates were gazing out the window, carefully trying not to give their presence away to whatever it was they were looking at. Look across the street in the second-story window. There's somebody watching us, man, John said to me. I looked out of the window, and sure enough, even in the darkness of the street outside, I could see the silhouette of what appeared to be a person. They were standing motionless in the direction of us. I squinted my eyes to make sure what I was seeing was correct. How long have they been standing there? I asked. No idea. Wolowitz got up to go take a piss and just so happened to see him, John replied. I looked over at Wolowitz, who was our other squad mate, as he nodded his head, confirming John's story. You think it's a scout? Somebody spoke up. I mean, maybe. But that building should be cleared. There's not supposed to be anybody on this street but us. John said. He was right, which made the situation more odd and concerning. John, you still got that rifle with the thermal scope? I asked. John nodded and left briefly to grab it from its leaning position against a wall. He brought it back, and knowing what I was asking, looked down the scope, switching it to thermal imaging. He looked from the scope to the window with his eyes, and then back to the scope again, before bringing the rifle to me and saying, Dude, look, no heat signature there. It probably isn't a person at all. I looked down the scope, and John was right. It looked like I was staring into an empty window. But when I brought the gun down, there was clearly something there. It might be a mirror or a Kotrak or something. Someone said, I thought they may have been right, until we all looked at the window again and saw whatever or whoever it was walk away from the window out of sight. What the fuck, John and I said at the same time. I grabbed my radio to call this in. Grab your shit. We're going over there once we get clearance. If they're a scout, we'd better grab them soon, I said. Everybody started milling about, grabbing their vests and their guns. I got into a small argument with HQ about what I saw. I basically had to beg them to let us go over there to check it out, but I was given the green light. Looking back on the situation, I didn't feel any fear going into that building across the street. Confusion, yes. Nervousness, yes. But I wasn't scared of what I was gonna find. John hung back at the apartment to provide overwatch with his rifle. I split the squad up, sending half to the back of the building to watch for any escapees, and half with me as we headed into the front to clear it. We put small explosives on the front metal door and breached. Just as we had 100 times before, we headed in, clearing floor by floor. We reached the top floor and found nobody. The place was completely empty. You see anybody come out? I radioed to my guys covering the back. Negative, they replied. We checked the basement for any tunnel systems, but found nothing. There was no way to access the roof, so this left us all pretty puzzled. Where the fuck did they go? I thought to myself. Bang, we all ducked for cover. It was a single gunshot, followed by screaming, screaming that I'll never forget. Terrified screams coming from the apartment across the street. "Shit, John," I said aloud as we all rushed out of the building and back across the street. The guys around back heard what was up too and tagged along. We made it back to the apartment, and what I saw there will stay with me for the rest of my life. John was laying in a pool of his own blood, with a look of terror on his face. It didn't take a doctor to tell he was already gone. His rifle lay beside him on the ground. But that's not what was weird. What was weird was that his hands and his feet, along with his tongue and eyeballs, were all gone. "Oh fuck," someone said. "What the hell happened?" someone else said. I had no answer. "Look at the walls," someone said. I looked at the wall, and there was what appeared to be bloody hand and footprints lining the walls and ceiling. It was as if someone had killed John, removed his body parts somehow, and then made off with them by crawling the walls and ceiling to the other side of the apartment. I was furious. I was on the verge of tears. John had been one of the few men I made friends with during the godforsaken war. I pointed my rifle ahead of me and followed the prints. I followed them to a far room on the other side of the apartment. Then they stopped. It was like whoever, more like whatever it was, just vanished. "Of fucking course," I whispered. We bugged out from that location with John's body. I couldn't imagine the look on his mom's face when she saw her baby like how we found him. I attended the funeral back home. His mom, along with the army, asked what had happened. We just told them that John had been found by some sicko and that we couldn't get to him in time. My squad and I still operated after that, but out of respect, and fear at least on my part, we don't talk much about what happened that night. I share this hoping that somehow someone can tell me what I saw or has a similar story. That was another horrifying story. If you have made it this far in the video without leaving or falling asleep, congratulations. Okay, let's get into the next story. This next one comes to use from a user by the name Donovan221. And the title of this one is "I'm Pretty Sure My Girlfriend is a Ghost." This one is a horrifying subversion of a heartbreak story. So get ready and let's get into our next story. My girlfriend and I met 5 years ago. I was fresh out of college, well on my way to becoming an engineer. She walked into my life right at the perfect time. She completed me, brought love into my life, showed me the touch of a woman. After about a year or so of dating, I asked her to move in with me. Those next 4 years were the happiest I had ever been. I was respected in my field. I was making more money than I could count. And I had moved she and I into a beautiful home right off the coast of California. We had began thinking about children. I could only think about the ring I wanted to put on her finger. I went to every jeweler in town, searching for the perfect ring for my soon-to-be bride. I knew I could feel it in my bones when I finally found the perfect ring. 3 carats. I knew it was the right one because of the way it sparkled in the light. Its gleam matches hers, 100%. I purchased the ring without a second thought. I kept it hidden for a few weeks. I planned to give it to her on the night of our 5 years anniversary after a nice dinner at her favorite restaurant. However, that moment would never come. A week before our anniversary, I got a call from the hospital. My beautiful girl had been in an accident and was in ICU. I rushed to the hospital, breaking a flurry of traffic laws in the process. I arrived and demanded to know where she was. The nurse directed me to her room, and that's where I saw her. Her gorgeous face was bruised and bloodied. Tubes ran through her arms and nose, blood and medicine being manually circulated through her body. Her mother was a mess. I was a mess. The doctors remained calm. I fell to my knees in the room, begging God to show mercy on my sweet girl. I stayed in that hospital room for a full week before finally returning home to shower and get some real rest. When I awoke the next morning, I brushed my teeth and got dressed, planning to immediately return to my girlfriend's side. I grabbed my wallet and keys, and just as I opened the door, I was greeted by the most precious thing I could possibly ask for. There before me stood my girlfriend, as beautiful as ever. Her wounds had healed, her face was clear, and her smile reignited my soul. I felt my eyes fill with tears of happiness as I thanked God for answering my prayers. However, as I went to hug her, she pulled away before I could touch her. Without a word, she stepped beside me and into our home. She then gracefully and effortlessly glided to our bedroom, where she hit the mattress and buried herself under our covers. I smirked to myself, relieved to have her home, and flicked off the light so that she could finally rest peacefully in her own bed. After about 4 hours or so, I went back to check on her. After nearly losing her before getting the chance, I brought the ring with me, ready to ask her to be mine forever, just in case I didn't get the chance again. I found that she was still curled up under the covers, unmoved. I called out to her, no response. I flicked on the light and took a seat next to her on the bed. Just as I put my arm out to touch her, my phone began to ring. It was her mother, exiting the room as to not be rude. I took the call from the hallway, just outside the bedroom. Her mother answered in tears, nearly inconsolable. "She's gone," she kept repeating. "I know she's gone. Don't worry, she's here with me," I replied, a bit confused. This prompted her mother to wail harder. "I'm so sorry, Donovan. She loved you very much. I have to go. I'll call you in a bit." She then hung up the phone. Completely dumbstruck, I stared at my phone, unsure of what had just happened. I then returned to my room. "Sweetie, did you not tell your mother that you—" I had to cut myself off. My mouth hung agape, and my blood ran cold, because the bed that had previously held my precious girl tightly under its covers was now flat. This next story will be our longest and last story tonight. Its title is Space Girl, and this last story comes to us from a user named Head of Spectre. This one is long and one of the creepiest of all. So let's get into it. We called her Space Girl. Her real name was Megan Daniels, but nobody actually called her that. She'd been Space Girl since grade 2. She was the kind of kid who stuck out in the crowd with her long red hair, ghostly pale skin, and Coke bottle glasses. For as long as I'd known her, Space Girl had been quiet. She didn't like to be around us. She didn't play with us when we were kids. She didn't even talk much. Most of the time, she'd find somewhere to sit, far away from everyone else. Then she'd open up her little notebook and scribble inside of it. Sometimes she wrote poems, sometimes she drew. But she was always off on her own little world. Nowadays, I understand why we targeted her. She was different, and she was alone. That doesn't justify any of it, but kids can be cruel. I remember that it was Sasha Brown who told me that Space Girl was retarded because her mother was on drugs. She probably just made that up, but we all believed it. She had always been the worst towards Space Girl, and she kept that up until the end. It all started in grade 5, when Sasha took her notebook. It had been raining that day, so we'd had an indoor recess. Space Girl sat in the corner at her desk, eyes focused on her notebook as she methodically worked on a drawing. Sasha and I had been sitting nearby at our desks, and we simply just watched her do her thing. I can't believe they let that retard sit in with us. Sasha murmured, "Look at her. Why do they even let them in schools? They aren't gonna learn anything. Better than leaving her at home with her crackhead mom," said Tanya Everett. She and I weren't exactly friends, but she sat close to Sasha. And my dad says, he sees a different car in front of her house every day. He says that she lets boys come and they pay her so they can have sex. None of us could actually say the dreaded S word at the time. Sex was still a terrible unknown thing, and we all had been raised to believe that nobody decent would ever do it. Space Girl paused, and her eyes darted away from her book to look at us. I can only imagine she'd heard us. Sasha just stared right back at her. "What, do you have a problem, Space Girl?" she asked. The teacher was out of earshot, and that gave her carte blanche to say whatever she wanted. Space Girl didn't respond. She just looked back down at her notebook, but Sasha had been challenged, or at least she thought she'd been. She looked over to the teacher's desk to make sure she was busy. Then she got up and moved closer to Space Girl. "What are you even doing in there, retard?" She reached out to snatch the book before Space Girl could stop her. "What even is this? A unicorn? What are you, 5?" She handed the book to me, and I took it on instinct. There was a brightly colored drawing of a unicorn inside. The artwork was actually pretty nice, but I would never have said so. The book was passed on to Tanya next, and Space Girl could only look at us helplessly. "Wow, you can't even draw. Look at this." She tore the page out of the notebook, and Space Girl let out a startled whimper, as if she'd been struck. The picture was crumpled up, and the book was thrown on the floor by Space Girl's desk. "Draw something that isn't trash next time," Tanya said, and Sasha just giggled, as if it was anything other than being mean-spirited, just for the sake of it. Space Girl slowly picked her book up off the floor, avoiding eye contact as Tanya and Sasha turned away from her. I continued to stare. I remember that the way she moved was so defeated, as if she were shrinking in on herself. She looked up at me, but only for a moment, and I felt bad for her. I really did, but I didn't do anything about it. I just left her to rejoin the others. After that, Space Girl became an easy target for Sasha and Tanya. Every chance they got, they'd harass her, and I regret to admit that I was usually right there with them. During the days where we could go outside for recess, Space Girl would always sit beneath the same tree, always working in her notebook. When she did, we would always lean on the trunk and look down over Space Girl's shoulder. "Wow, that's really good, Space Girl," was how most of her comments would start. "Did you mean to draw it like it got hit by a truck? Or is that just your style?" There was never a compliment. She would always find something to needle. "Can you draw me?" Sasha asked once. I heard that retards were always like art geniuses or something. Maybe it'll even look like a person. Space Girl didn't look up at her. She seemed to be trying not to acknowledge the insults. I won't pretend like I was blameless either. I never stopped them, and there were plenty of times where I was right there, making fun of her because that was what we did, and we weren't the only ones. More or less, everyone hurt her in some way or another, but she never complained. I think she was too scared to. It was late December in 7th grade where things got even worse. I don't know all the details, and I don't know just for how long things had been boiling over, but I'd heard a rumor that James Hardy had it out for Space Girl. James had only been in my class a few times, and he wasn't in my class that year. He was a small, mousy-looking kid who was convinced he was the world's toughest gangster. The rumors said that someone had seen his dad going into Space Girl's house. Naturally, there had been speculation that they'd been having sex. Someone told me that James' parents had been divorcing because of it. Somehow all of these rumors had mutated into claims that James and Space Girl were dating. And I think that was what had rubbed him the wrong way. We were coming in from recess when some boys decided to pull a little prank on James. The whole prank had been set up by Brian Jordan and his brother Mike. They had some mistletoe for the holiday season and had set it up in the hall leading back to our classroom. Mike had grabbed Space Girl during recess and were holding her behind the door where the mistletoe was. When James walked through, they pushed her at him and snapped a picture. I'd been just behind James when it happened. I watched as Space Girl came flying out of seemingly nowhere, eyes wide and afraid, then slammed into James. They both hit the ground, and I could hear the other boys laughing. "Look, she wanted to give you a kiss," one the boys said. Space Girl was trying to crawl away from James and pick up her notebook, but somebody had kicked it out of sight. I remember that she looked back towards James, and there were tears in her eyes. She must have been terrified with everything that was going on. She clearly hadn't wanted any part in this, but there she was at the center of it. "You fucking faggot assholes," James yelled as he picked himself up. Hey, she just wanted to give you a smooch. Odd Brian. Come on, give her a kiss. Someone pushed Space Girl towards James, and he glared at her as if all of this was her fault. She tried to stand and run, but he was angry and he wasn't thinking straight. I watched as he grabbed her and hit her. A square punch to the jaw. Then he tossed her to the ground and went after Brian next. A teacher had to get in to pull James off of him. He, Space Girl, and the Jordan brothers ended up getting suspended right before the Christmas holidays. We didn't see Space Girl until January. We didn't see James or his friends ever again. On Christmas Eve, there was a car accident on the highway outside of my town. Supposedly, it had swerved off the road to avoid an animal of some kind and gone into a ditch. Mike, Brian, and their parents didn't survive. On December 27th, James was killed while outside shoveling his driveway. My parents told me that he'd been attacked by an animal, probably a deer or something. But that seemed so unusual. I'd never heard anything about deer attacking people before, especially not in my area. I went over to Sasha's house on the day before New Year's. We'd both gotten some gift cards for Christmas, and we were planning to walk to the mall together to use them. Her parents weren't home. They both had to work, so it was just us when I got there. Hey, kept me waiting, she said when I knocked on the door. Sorry. It's fine. I'll be ready in a bit. Come on upstairs. I want to show you something. I didn't question what it was. I figured it was just something else she'd gotten for Christmas, so I went upstairs with her. You're gonna love it, she promised me. It's gonna be so funny. She led me to her bedroom, and as soon as she opened the door, I spotted a familiar notebook on her desk. Where did you get this? I asked, walking closer to it. Space Girl dropped it when Brian and his brother pulled that prank the other day. She dropped it. I may have grabbed it, just for safekeeping. She cracked a wry grin before opening the notebook. Look at this. She's been drawing the same damn unicorns forever. She didn't even finish this one. She paused at one small picture that was labeled the Unicorn Prince. It depicted an empty field with a blank space where the titular prince should have been. Sasha flipped through the pages a little more until she got to the newer ones. I figured since they kicked Space Girl out for a little while, and her mom is too poor to get her anything for the holidays, I'd step up. What do you think? Sasha wasn't anywhere near as good of an artist as Space Girl was, but the simple detail in what she had drawn turned my stomach. In her first picture, Space Girl was hanging from a rope. Her tongue was hanging out, and her eyes were closed. In the second one, Space Girl had a gun in her mouth. In the third one, she was standing on the edge of a building. Sasha giggled as I flipped through her crude depictions of suicide. There were pages of them. What do you think? She asked with a grin. I'll bet she'll lose her shit. I closed the notebook and looked over at Sasha. Are you out of your mind? I asked. Sasha's grin faded. What do you mean? You stole her notebook just so you could draw these. Sasha, that's really messed up. It's Space Girl. Who the hell cares about Space Girl, Jane? You just drew her killing herself over and over again. I took the book off her desk. Do you not understand what's wrong with that? Sasha just stared at me like I was crazy. Fine, sue me for trying to be funny. Sasha said, just give it here. She outstretched a hand to take the notebook, but I pulled back from her. No, you're just going to put something else in there. Anger flared in Sasha's eyes. Jane, just give me the book. No. I opened the book, and I started to tear out those pages of Space Girl's suicide. Sasha lunged for me, trying to grab at the book and stop me, but pushed her back. I didn't mean to push so hard, but I did, and she fell, landing hard on the ground. For a moment, Sasha looked up at me, wide-eyed and shocked. I don't think anyone had laid a hand on her like that before. Then I saw something in her eyes, not just anger. Something worse. It was the same thing that had prompted her to draw those horrible pictures of Space Girl. I turned, and I ran, bolting down her stairs and out her front door, back into the snow. I clutched Space Girl's notebook to my chest the entire time, and I didn't let it go until I got home. I spent the rest of the Christmas break terrified that my parents would get a call from Sasha's. I'd pushed her, and that seemed like such a big deal at the time. In hindsight, I doubt Sasha would have told her parents what had happened. They would have asked why I'd pushed her, and I would have told them about the notebook. On some level, she must have known that what she'd done was wrong. She was a cruel person, but there was a limit. Part of me hoped that she'd realize that I was right, and we could patch things up when school started again. But honestly, I wasn't so sure. I remember looking through Space Girl's drawings, the ones that she'd done. I remembered the ones I'd made fun of the most. There was one with a mermaid on a rock, combing her hair. Her eyes were closed in a relaxed bliss. I remembered saying how stupid her facial expression had looked, but honestly, I kinda liked it. I flipped through the pages some more, through unicorns, fairies, and castles. But I paused at the page depicting the unicorn prince. Back at Sasha's place, it had been blank, but at my house, it was finished. The unicorn prince stood proudly in his field, looking skywards with his horn proudly displayed. Maybe I had been thinking of a different picture. I brushed it off and flipped to the back where Sasha's pictures were. One by one, I started tearing them out of the notebook and tossing them in the trash. It was a waste of paper, but I refused to give it back to Space Girl with those images still in it. On the first day back to school, I was up early. I made sure the notebook was packed into my bag and was out as early as I could be. The snow on the ground was almost pristine as I walked to school, but I remember seeing some tracks on my lawn, headed down the side of my house. Deep U-shaped indents that looked like they'd been made by hooves. A deer, perhaps. I didn't dwell on them and made my way down the freshly shoveled sidewalk and back to school. I wasn't entirely sure if Space Girl would be back yet, but she was. She was alone in the classroom, sitting at her desk and drawing in a brand new notebook. She paused briefly when I walked in to join her, and I could see her sideing me. She didn't say a word as I drew nearer, but I thought I saw her shoulders tense up ever so slightly. "Hey," I said, I hope you had a nice holiday." She didn't respond. "I'm sorry about what happened the other day." I didn't know anything about it, but it just seemed really mean-spirited. Still no answer. I reached into my backpack, taking out her old notebook. I put it on her desk in front of her. She stared at it, still silent, then back at me. Sasha took it. I was over at her house the other day, and she showed it to me. I had to take some pages out, but she drew some really awful things in there. I didn't think it would be right to give it back with those things in there. I paused, feeling smaller as Space Girl stared at me. She didn't seem angry or thankful. She didn't seem anything at all, just stoic. "I'm sorry if I wasn't all that great to you before," I said, and then I shuffled off to my desk. Space Girl waited until I sat down before she opened her notebook and inspected it. Then she closed her new book and started something new on a fresh page in her old one. It wasn't much, but it made me feel at least a little good for what I'd done. When Sasha got in, she didn't talk to me. She didn't even look at me. Neither did Tanya or any of our other mutual friends. I knew from the moment they walked in that I'd burned my bridges with them, but I still wanted to try. The teacher hadn't come in yet, so I figured it might be worth it to try and talk to Sasha. I got up to move closer to her, and she gave me a look of utter disgust. "What do you want?" she spat. Now it was my turn to be silent. "Fuck off and leave us alone." Tanya said, "You'd obviously rather hang out with the fucking retard than us, and I really don't want you spreading your retard germs to us. It's a quarantine issue." I stared at both of them, and I could have sworn I knew how Space Girl felt. What was I supposed to say to any of that? Instead, I just returned to my desk without a word. Space Girl stared at me the entire time. Her pencil rested over her notebook, but she didn't write anything. She set it down, tore out the page she'd been writing on, and jammed it into her pocket. I later saw her toss it into the trash during lunch. I didn't really have anyone left, so I thought that maybe it might be a good idea to pull it out. Maybe it was something she wasn't happy with. I'd never seen her throw a drawing out before. I was thinking that maybe I could use it as a peace offering of sorts, or something along those lines. When I saw what she'd written on it, I almost threw it back into the trash. "Your words. There is a land where your sorry may go. A sickening land where it always snows. The snow is putrid in color and smell. Its substance filth and things I won't tell. Only your father has been there before. One day your boyfriend will visit once more. This place in your carcass, this humanoid hell. Your sorry can go there to this hole in your shell. My unsubtle message, this subtextual jazz, is take your apology and stuff it up your ass." This was unlike anything I'd ever seen her write. It was so crass and spiteful. This was as close to hatred as she could have gotten. I understood why she'd thrown it out. It didn't fit with everything else she'd done. Those things had been beautiful, despite what people had said to her. This was angry and ugly. This was something she'd written for me. I put it in my pocket. I wasn't going to give it back to her, but I wanted to keep it. I wanted to remember the way I'd made her feel. 8th grade wasn't fun for me. I had very few friends left, and Sasha never forgave me for turning on her. Her version of the story was slowly warped as time went on. First, I'd punched her and stolen the book. Then I tried to kiss her, punched her when she'd refused, then stole the book to try and get her in trouble. Rumors of me being a dyke spread pretty quickly, and hot on their heels came the rumors that I was dating Space Girl. I tried not to let them bother me too much. I knew the truth, and at the end of the day, I'd done the right thing. By the time high school rolled around, I was hopping for a fresh start. There were new faces, and I figured I could make friends with them before Sasha's rumors spread. I had a bit of success in that department. I fell in with a better crowd at least. Sasha stuck with her same old clique. It grew ever so slightly, but she was determined to live out the movie Mean Girls, and most people didn't pay her any mind. Space Girl barely changed at all. I didn't see her much when high school started. She was in a few of my classes, but I rarely saw her outside of them. Whenever she had a moment, she'd be in the library, usually in one of the corner cubicles, working on her drawings. Sometimes I thought about talking to her and trying to strike up a friendship, but it never felt right. Sasha's bullying never let up, of course. Of course, she stalked Space Girl to the library, where she'd pull the same old shit she'd been pulling since the 5th grade. She'd leer over her cubicle and comment on her drawings, picking them apart just like she always had. I stopped her whenever I saw it, but I didn't always see it. Coming to her rescue again, Jane. Sasha asked once when I'd interrupted her. Tanya leered at me from behind her, chewing gum with her mouth open. "What's she ever done to you anyways?" I asked. "She's just minding her own business." "Oh, what's she done to you, dyke?" Sasha hissed. She leaned down over her cubicle and looked down at the notebook. "Unicorns, unicorns, unicorns, fucking unicorns. When are you going to grow up, Space Girl?" "Hey, I told you to stop." I rounded the cubicle, and I saw Sasha recoil. For a moment, I saw a bit of fear in her eyes. It vanished quickly and was replaced with a familiar rage. "Fine," she said. "Tan, let's leave the happy couple to their alone time." She pulled away from the cubicle and disappeared with Tanya nipping at her heels like a faithful terrier. Space Girl remained hunched over her notebook, her long red hair spilling over her shoulders. She seemed impossibly still. I turned to leave her when I heard, "Thanks." I looked back at her and saw that she was looking at me. You're welcome," I said. "Let me know if she bothers you again, all right?" "I will, but you're usually there anyways." Her voice was soft and low. I'd heard it before, but I don't remember her ever speaking directly to me. "Yeah, well, it's just not right. She's such a child. One of these days she's going to have to grow up." Space Girl just nodded, looking over towards the library door, then back down at her notebook again. For a moment, I thought about asking her about what she was drawing. I thought about saying something else, but no, I didn't want to make her uncomfortable. I left her alone again. In 10th grade, I took art as an elective. I wasn't much of an artist, but I figured it would be an easy course. To the surprise of no one, Space Girl was there. I actually asked her to work with me on a few group projects. I think the prospect of being asked to work together was foreign to her. She looked at me suspiciously when I did it, but when she smiled, it was the biggest smile I'd ever seen. I went to her house for the first time to work on a portrait project with her once. We were supposed to take turns drawing portraits of each other, and I'd volunteered to let her draw me first. Rumors of her mother had always surrounded Space Girl, so I wasn't entirely sure what to expect when I got there. I certainly wasn't expecting the quiet, neatly kept house that I found. The woman who answered the door looked like an older version of her daughter. Sans the Coke bottle glasses. "You must be Jane," she said. She wasn't smiling, but she didn't sound upset either. "Yes, ma'am. Come on in. Megan's upstairs. She was just getting ready for you." The house was warm with plenty of knick-knacks on the walls. Plates and porcelain dolls mostly. Her mom sent me upstairs, and I didn't waste any time. On the landing leading up to Space Girl's room, I could see a mural of family photos and paused to look at them. I could recognize Space Girl and her mother in most of them. Space Girl never seemed to be smiling. I only saw her father in a few of the very early pictures. Space Girl looked like she was only a young child in the few pictures I saw him in, though. I didn't dwell for long and headed towards what I assumed was her room. The cardboard stars and planets on it gave it away. Sure enough, she was inside waiting for me. She sat facing the door behind an easel in the center of her room. Her bed was neatly made and tucked away in the corner. She had a clean little desk that she'd clearly been working on and had set a chair out for me to sit on. I hadn't expected something so overwhelmingly formal, and I almost started laughing. But then I noticed her walls. They weren't just covered in drawings. The art pieces on them were full on paintings. They were the same fantasy depictions she usually did, but the colors were so vivid. The clouds looked like fluffy pillows, and the castles seemed great and infinite. "Holy shit, are these yours?" "They are," Space Girl said softly. She stood up and took the plate of cookies from me, then moved it to her desk. "It's soothing," she said after a while. "Painting, I mean. I pick the drawings I like the most, and I finish them." She spoke slowly, like she was carefully choosing her words. I almost felt like there was something that she was trying to avoid. I spotted a painting on the floor that looked like her father. The style was the same, but the content was different. He was surrounded by awkward scribbles, and he looked completely and utterly terrified. Space Girl looked down at it, but she seemed to disapprove of it. She turned it around so I wouldn't have to look at it. "We should get started," she said. "Sorry." "No, it's all right," I said. I sat in the chair for her. "I'd like to hear about it." Space Girl watched me from the corner of her eye for a moment, as if she doubted I was being serious. But eventually, she sat down behind the easel and started to draw soon after that. She was talking too. I stayed long after she'd gotten what she needed for her sketch, just to talk. She told me that she'd always liked fantasy and how she liked unicorns because they were simple but pretty. I hung on to every word, and I could have sworn I saw her smiling shyly as she talked. The portrait she'd done of me was something else entirely. Her work had always been beautiful, but this made me look transcendent. I wasn't entirely sure that I was looking at myself at first. There was something about the look on my face. There was a small, almost content smile there. The warmth it conveyed was almost Disney-esque. I love it, I told her. That's incredible spa, Megan. That's really great. You can call me Space Girl if you want, she said. I don't mind the nickname, not as much as I mind the people at least. My awe quickly turned to shame, but Space Girl didn't look upset. She just stared at me blankly like she so often did. No, not blankly. Her face might not have conveyed much emotion, but there was definitely some emotion there. I wish I'd been nicer to you when we were younger, I said. Is that why you're here right now? Space Girl asked. No, I'm here for the assignment. I mean the art assignment. The portraits. She continued to stare. Did you pick me because you felt bad for me? She asked. No, I just thought it would be cool to work with you. Space Girl didn't react for a moment, but then she just nodded. Okay. Her flat tone made it hard to know what she meant by that. She stood up and walked over to the portrait. Mom can drive you home if you need a ride, she said. I opened my mouth to say something else. I wanted to apologize, but I didn't know what had I offended her. Had I said something wrong? All right, thanks. It was the only thing I could think of. See you tomorrow. With that, I left her. I was almost afraid to see Space Girl the next morning. I drifted through my classes that day until I reached art. And when I did, I wasn't expecting what I saw. She had clearly been up late, but what she'd brought in stole my breath away. It was my portrait, but she'd done more with it than I thought possible. She painted over the sketch, turning me into something beautiful. Flowers bloomed around my brown hair, and a crown of daisies, lilies, and chrysanthemums adorned my head. The colors were so vivid, and I looked so at peace in it. Space Girl was looking right at me as I came in, as if she was gauging my reaction. But all I could do was stare wide-eyed and in awe. When I looked back at Space Girl, she was smiling at me. Her project single-handedly netted us an A on the project and got the privilege of being hung up outside of the art classroom. Of course, I told her how much I loved it, and I remember the way she smiled when I did. I remember thinking that it was the cutest smile I'd ever seen. My portrait was up for barely even a day before Sasha had to make a comment. I'd been on my lunch and had just gotten some fries from the cafeteria when she and Tanya ambushed me. Where's your flower crown, Dyke? Sasha said. Leave me alone, I said, brushing past them but Sasha was out for blood. I always knew you were a little dyke, but now you've posted solid proof of it. We've gone and cracked the case, haven't we? So what happened? Did you go to her house and lick her retarded little snatch? You must be a real good dyke because she went and drew that for you. I tried to walk away from her, but Sasha and Tanya just kept following me. What's wrong? Am I not pretty enough for you, dyke? She snapped at me. Maybe she only fucks retarded girls. Tanya said, I'll bet Space Girl squealed like a pig when she came. I stopped dead in my tracks, and I heard Sasha stop behind me. I don't know what it was about what she'd said that pissed me off so much, but those two had finally struck a nerve. I spun around, swinging my lunch tray as hard as I could. Fries were scattered everywhere, but although I was aiming for Tanya, I hit Sasha. She went down hard, and I'm not sure if she was even still conscious when she hit the ground. Tanya was on me in an instant. She slammed me back against a wall and kept me pinned. She had size and strength on me, and there wasn't a thing I could do to stop her. Several other students grabbed at us. A teacher finally got involved, and all three of us got escorted to see the principal. As we left the cafeteria, I saw Space Girl in one of the halls, just staring at me. Naturally, I got a 3-day suspension, but Tanya and Sasha were fine. Both of them said they'd just been walking, and I attacked unprovoked. It was their word against mine. Sasha had a familiar shit-eating grin on as she left the office with only a bruise on her forehead to show for her troubles. But there was a familiar look in her eyes. That same anger I'd seen last time I'd laid a hand on her, and something about it scared me. When I came back to school, I realized that I had every reason to be afraid. My portrait was missing. I wondered if they'd taken it down because I'd attacked Sasha, but the truth was a lot worse. Someone took it, Space Girl said. She was sitting in her usual spot in the library when I found her, sketching flowers in her notebook. When? The day after you hit Sasha. I don't think anyone's found it yet. She didn't look up at me, just stayed focused on her art. She didn't need to say it for me to know who she blamed. Who else would it be? I had half a mind to confront Sasha about it, but I didn't know if that would be a good idea or not. Sasha could easily just cry wolf. I wouldn't put it past her. In the end, it didn't matter. By the time I was headed to art class, the painting was back. But there had been some modifications made to it. The words, "retard fucking dyke," had been painted across my portrait in bright red. I saw it from down the hall and could see some other students whispering amongst themselves beneath it. I didn't know what to say or do, but this felt like too much. The picture was taken down quickly, but the damage was done. Sasha had gotten her revenge, and it didn't stop with just the painting. Space Girl looked different than when I'd seen her in the library. She seemed uneasy, and her eyes were red like she'd been crying. "I'm sorry about the painting," I said softly. She looked at me before sighing. "I knew she'd do something like that," she said. "I'm so used to it by now that it doesn't bother me anymore." I'm sorry she wrote those things about you, though. But you worked hard on that, I said. I'd be upset too. She just shook her head. That's not it, she said. She reached into her pocket, pulling out a crumpled up piece of paper, then slid it over to me. Slowly, I uncrumpled the paper, and my eyes widened as I recognized what was on it. It wasn't the same drawing, but it was close enough. It was a depiction of Space Girl hanging herself, and me beside her. A caption read, "Retard Dyke Wedding." There were so many in my locker, Space Girl said. This is what she drew in your notebook when I returned it to you. This is what I had to take out. Space Girl looked down at the picture again before averting her eyes. She didn't pay much attention during class. Instead of taking notes, she sketched in her notebook. I looked over a few times to see her drawing another unicorn. This one seemed so similar to the one I'd seen before. She must not have been quite happy with it, though. When I looked back at her notebook, the unicorn wasn't there anymore. She must have just erased it, but it seemed so clean, like it hadn't been erased at all. Tanya was following me on my walk home that evening. I didn't know what she had in mind, but I didn't want to put up with it. When I was in the middle of a small walking path that cut behind some of the houses on my street, I stopped and looked at Tanya as she kept approaching. "What do you want?" I asked. "It's a surprise," she said. "Sasha and I just want you to know how much we love dykes in this town." Oops, I've said too much. I wanted to hit her. Dear God, I just wanted to hit her. But we both knew she could overpower me. Whatever Tanya had in mind, it wasn't anything good. She drew closer to me, unafraid of anything I'd do. "Come on, Dyke. Go home," she said. "Let's go check out your surprise." In a sudden horrible moment, I realized that Tanya was threatening me. I also realized that I couldn't outrun her. I couldn't fight her off. I didn't really have much of a choice but to do as she asked. Slowly, I turned and walked towards my house, with Tanya at my heels. It wasn't far, and up ahead I could see Sasha sitting on a park bench. From a distance, I recognized the red gas can beside her, and I stopped dead in my tracks. Tanya seized me by the arm and pulled me towards the bench. Sasha just watched with a wide, manic grin. "Hey Jane," she said, "how's it going?" "What the fuck is this?" "Just wanted to chat," Sasha said with a cold chuckle. "You think you can get away with pulling the shit you did the other day? No, you've been treating me like garbage for years. And for what? Because of Space Girl. You know who you're fucking choosing, right? Right. God, I hate that retard girl. But you know what? I hate you even more. Acting like you're better than me just because you feel bad for her. You're crazy." Sasha just laughed. "I'm not the one who clocked someone with a fucking tray just for a little bit of teasing. You're absolutely fucking psycho." On the bench behind her, I saw the portrait that Space Girl had painted of me. Sasha picked it up and tossed it in front of me, then picked up the gas can and dumped it onto the canvas. "You want to be a dyke? I don't care. But I'm not letting you and your retarded whore put your shit up." So say goodbye to your little project, slut. Sasha reached into her pocket and took out a book of matches. Her grin widened before suddenly vanishing outright as she looked at something behind us. What the hell? Tanya said, and I craned my neck to try and see what they were seeing. As for believing it, that was another story entirely. Standing on the path behind us was a unicorn, but the way it looked was all wrong. This was nothing like a regular horse. Its body was plain white and almost textureless save for the many thin blue lines that ran along its body. It looked like it had been cut out from a sheet of lined paper, but that was impossible. It had to be impossible. Neatly done gray lines defined the shape of the horse. In fact, the lines reminded me of the ones Space Girl used. This unicorn looked like it had walked out of one of her notebooks. Tanya let me go and stumbled back a few steps, wide-eyed as she stared at the advancing unicorn. It let out an angry noise before charging straight for Tanya. She panicked and tried to run. In her desperation to escape, she bolted down the path. But she couldn't outrun the paper unicorn. It lowered its head as it drew nearer to her, and in one swift movement, the horn pierced Tanya's back, impaling her straight through the chest. She screamed as she was hoisted off the ground, and the unicorn circled back to fix Sasha in a murderous glare. Tanya looked down at the massive spike sticking out of her, her eyes clearly wide with horror, and her body twitching its last spasms as the life quickly drained from her. The unicorn lowered its head to let her slide off of its horn, and she hit the ground in a bundle of limbs. Sasha and I stared in silent horror as the unicorn reared up on its hind legs and brought its hooves down upon Tanya's body. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She simply lay there as she was trampled again and again. I can only hope she died quickly. Sasha dropped the unlit match and took a slow, terrified step back before toppling over. I stumbled back and looked down to see the portrait of me at her feet. But it had changed. That beautifully painted version of me was now leaning out of the canvas, invading the real world and clutching Sasha's leg tightly. Still with that look of contentment on her face, I watched as the painted me slowly slipped back into her panting, and she took Sasha's leg with her. Fuck, fuck, fuck. Sasha desperately swatted at the painted me, but she couldn't overpower it. She couldn't escape. Her nails tried to dig into the pavement as she was slowly dragged into the canvas. She looked at me in horror, silently begging for help, but all I could do was stare back at her in silence. Jane, help, please, please. The hands of the painted me reached up, seizing Sasha by the hair and forcing her down into the canvas. It was like watching something pull her underwater. 1 minute she was there, the next she was gone. I stood silent in the park, staring at the painting, then at the paper unicorn. The unicorn huffed before retreating off into the woods, and then I was alone. Slowly, I approached the painting, and I looked down at it. It had changed, and now it depicted Sasha, her mouth open in a horrified final scream. After some hesitation, I picked up the painting. I could return it to Space Girl in the morning. They chalked Tanya's death up to an animal attack, and nobody ever found Sasha. I never asked Space Girl about what I saw. I don't think even she knew the answer, although she certainly knew much more than I did. High school was 10 years ago, though, and I've chosen not to remember as much as I can. I've got my own life to live now, and I try not to ask so many questions. Sometimes I see paintings move, but I don't bother with a second glance, and I never ask my wife about them. She doesn't like to talk about it, and I won't ever force her. The painting of Sasha hangs in her studio at home, right beside the painting of her father. Sometimes I look at it, and I wonder if maybe things could have been different, but I don't feel too guilty about it. I wouldn't feel too guilty if I heard another story about a suspicious trampling or animal attack either, but to my knowledge, there's been nothing of the sort. I guess I shouldn't be too surprised. I do my best to make sure nobody hurts my beautiful space girl. And now, as the last story slips into silence, notice how the room feels different. A little quieter, a little heavier. These stories may be finished, but the moments behind them don't end so easily. For the people who shared them, that feeling of something being wrong still lingers long after the screen goes dark. Maybe you'll shake it off by morning. Or maybe one detail will follow you into the night. Before you leave, if these stories stayed with you, if the darkness felt just a little too close, consider liking the video and subscribing. Because here on Unknown Facts, the stories don't disappear. They're always waiting